Canada demographics. The Canada 2016 census enumerated a total population of 35,151,728, an increase of around 5.0% over the 2011 figure. Between 2011 and May 2016, Canada's population grew by 1.7 million people, with immigrants accounting for two-thirds of the increase. Between 1990 and 2008, the population increased by 5.6 million, equivalent to 20.4% overall growth. The main drivers of population growth are immigration and, to a lesser extent, natural growth. Canada has one of the highest per capita immigration rates in the world, driven mainly by economic policy and, to a lesser extent, family reunification. The Canadian public as well as the major political parties support the current level of immigration. In 2014, a total of 260,400 immigrants were admitted to Canada, mainly from Asia. The Canadian government anticipated between 280,000 and 305,000 new permanent residents in the following years, a similar number of immigrants as in recent years. New immigrants settle mostly in major urban areas such as Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Canada also accepts large numbers of refugees, accounting for over 10% of annual global refugee resettlements. Canada's population density, at 3.7 inhabitants per square kilometre, 9.6 per square mile, is among the lowest in the world. Canada spans latitudinally from the 83rd parallel north to the 41st parallel north, and approximately 95% of the population is found south of the 55th parallel north. About 4/5 of the population lives within 150 kilometers, 93 miles, of the contiguous United States border. The most densely populated part of the country, accounting for nearly 50%, is the Quebec City-Windsor corridor in southern Quebec and southern Ontario along the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River. An additional 30% live along the British Columbia Lower Mainland, and the Calgary-Edmonton corridor in Alberta. In common with many other developed countries, Canada is experiencing a demographic shift towards an older population, with more retirees and fewer people of working age. In 2006, the average age was 39.5 years. By 2011, it had risen to approximately 39.9 years. As of 2013, the average life expectancy for Canadians is 81 years. The majority of Canadians, 69.9%, live in family households, 26.8% report living alone, and those living with unrelated persons reported at 3.7%. The average size of a household in 2006 was 2.5 people. Education. According to a 2012 report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, Canada is one of the most educated countries in the world. The country ranks first worldwide in the number of adults having tertiary education, with 51% of Canadian adults having attained at least an undergraduate college or university degree. Canada spends about 5.3% of its GDP on education. The country invests heavily in tertiary education, more than $20,000 per student. As of 2014, 89% of adults aged 25 to 64 have earned the equivalent of a high school degree, compared to an OECD average of 75%. Since the adoption of Section 23 of the Constitution Act, 1982, education in both English and French has been available in most places across Canada. Canadian provinces and territories are responsible for education provision. The mandatory school age ranges between 5 to 7 to 16 to 18 years, contributing to an adult literacy rate of 99%. In 2002, 43% of Canadians aged 25 to 64 possessed a post-secondary education. For those aged 25 to 34, the rate of post-secondary education reached 51%. The Program for International Student Assessment indicates Canadian students perform well above the OECD average, particularly in mathematics, science, and reading. Ethnicity. According to the 2016 census, the country's largest self-reported ethnic origin is Canadian, accounting for 32% of the population, followed by English, 18.3%, Scottish, 13.9%, French, 13.6%, Irish, 13.4%, German, 9.6%, Chinese, 5.1%, Italian, 4.6%, First Nations, 4.4%, Indian, 4.0%, and Ukrainian, 3.9%. There are 600 recognized First Nations governments or bands, encompassing a total of 1,525,565 people. Canada's Indigenous population is growing at almost twice the national rate, and 4% of Canada's population claimed an Indigenous identity in 2006. Another 22.3% of the population belonged to a non-Indigenous visible minority. In 2016, the largest visible minority groups were South Asian, 5.6%, Chinese, 5.1%, and Black, 3.5%. Between 2011 and 2016, the visible minority population rose by 18.4%. In 1961, less than 2% of Canada's population, about 300,000 people, were members of visible minority groups. Indigenous peoples are not considered a visible minority under the Employment Equity Act, and this is the definition that Statistics Canada also uses. Religion. Canada is religiously diverse, encompassing a wide range of beliefs and customs. Canada has no official church, and the government is officially committed to religious pluralism. Freedom of religion in Canada is a constitutionally protected right, allowing individuals to assemble and worship without limitation or interference. The practice of religion is now generally considered a private matter throughout society and the state. With Christianity in decline after having once been central and integral to Canadian culture and daily life, Canada has become a post-Christian, secular state. The majority of Canadians consider religion to be unimportant in their daily lives, but still believe in God. According to the 2011 census, 67.3% of Canadians identify as Christian. Of these, Roman Catholics make up the largest group, accounting for 38.7% of the population. Much of the remainder is made up of Protestants, who accounted for approximately 27% in a 2011 survey. The largest Protestant denomination is the United Church of Canada, accounting for 6.1% of Canadians, followed by Anglicans, 5.0%, and Baptists, 1.9%. Secularization has been growing since the 1960s. In 2011, 23.9% declared no religious affiliation, compared to 16.5% in 2001. The remaining 8.8% are affiliated with non-Christian religions, the largest of which are Islam, 3.2%, Hinduism, 1.5%, and Sikhism, 1.4%. Languages. A multitude of languages are used by Canadians, with English and French, the official languages, being the mother tongues of approximately 56% and 21% of Canadians, respectively. As of the 2016 census, just over 7.3 million Canadians listed a non-official language as their mother tongue. Some of the most common non-official first languages include Chinese, 1,227,680 first language speakers, Punjabi, 501,680, Spanish, 458,850, Tagalog, 431,385, Arabic, 419,895, German, 384,040, and Italian, 375,645. Canada's federal government practices official bilingualism, which is applied by the Commissioner of Official Languages in consonance with Section 16 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Federal Official Languages Act. English and French have equal status in federal courts, Parliament, and in all federal institutions. Citizens have the right, where there is sufficient demand, to receive federal government services in either English or French, and official language minorities are guaranteed their own schools in all provinces and territories. The 1977 Charter of the French language established French as the official language of Quebec. Although more than 85% of French-speaking Canadians live in Quebec, there are substantial francophone populations in New Brunswick, Alberta, and Manitoba. Ontario has the largest French-speaking population outside Quebec. New Brunswick, the only officially bilingual province, has a French-speaking Acadian minority constituting 33% of the population. There are also clusters of Acadians in southwestern Nova Scotia, on Cape Breton Island, and through central and western Prince Edward Island. Other provinces have no official languages as such, but French is used as a language of instruction, in courts, and for other government services, in addition to English. Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec allow for both English and French to be spoken in the provincial legislatures, and laws are enacted in both languages. In Ontario, French has some legal status, but is not fully co-official. There are 11 Indigenous language groups, composed of more than 65 distinct languages and dialects. Of these, only the Cree, Inuktitut and Ojibwe languages have a large enough population of fluent speakers to be considered viable to survive in the long term. Several Indigenous languages have official status in the Northwest Territories. Inuktitut is the majority language in Nunavut, and is one of 3 official languages in the territory. Additionally, Canada is home to many sign languages, some of which are Indigenous. American Sign Language, ASL, is spoken across the country due to the prevalence of ASL in primary and secondary schools. Due to its historical relation to the Francophone culture, Quebec Sign Language, LSQ, is spoken primarily in Quebec, although there are sizable Francophone communities in New Brunswick, Ontario, and Manitoba.